Well, hello, everyone, wherever you happen to be today around the world or in space, whatever the case happens to be. We're all in space anyway, so I guess that counts for something. But I'm really glad that you are here. And we're really going to have, I think, an interesting conversation today because we have a person who has written an interesting book. At least I think it's an interesting book. The title of the book is "Why Do Smart Girls Get into Bad Relationships and How Not to Do It Again." I think that's an interesting title, Smart Girls. I gotta say though, Barbara, who is our guest, Barbara Leigh, I don't know. I think there are more than smart girls that get into bad relationships or just do dumb things. I don't know. Why is it that most people do dumb things? But that's a different story and probably not what we're really going to cover today. But anyway, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset, and we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it is probably true. Why do so many people get into challenges? But we cope with what we have to, right?
Yes, we do.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being here and being on Unstoppable Mindset. Really looking forward to having a chance to really chat. Why don't we start, if we can, by you telling us a little bit about kind of the early Barbara growing up and all that.
All right. Well, I grew up
How's
on
that
a
for a
small.
great way to start?
That's a great way to start. I grew up on a small dairy farm in Wisconsin. I had two brothers and a sister, and mom and dad, and cats and a dog and cows. I lived in a small community. Everybody knew each other. Uh, Nothing really exciting about my childhood. I was in 4-H and I was in lots of activities in school. I did great in school, and I was wildly shy as a small child, but I managed to get comfortable enough with that by being a 4-H officer and being in leadership positions in the activities that I was in. I went off to college in Ripon, and I've been busy working on being me ever since.
Well, so um, you 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 don't sound like you're very shy today.
Like I said, I try to get past that. I'm still wildly introverted, but I'm at least, able to speak in public.
That's a start. Well, and that's a good. I've always been amazed, and I hear it so often that the top fear today is public speaking, and I've never really, and I know it's me, but I've never understood why it is because I've always been somewhat used to doing it. But I think that people approach public speaking oftentimes with kind of the wrong idea because I find that if people fear it, what they're really saying is they're afraid of the audience and what the audience might do. But I find that audiences generally don't tend to really want to view a speaker as being bad. They want speakers to succeed. So it's always been a puzzlement to me as to why people are afraid of public speaking.
Yeah, that is true. I was a speech communication major in college, and I had to take public speaking as a course. And we had a guy in there that was just shook. His whole body shook when he started out. And by the end of the course, he was the best speaker there. I think he just needed to practice doing it and find out it's not so bad.
Well, what did he do? What do you have any notion of what really eliminated his fear?
I think he just got better each time. I think it really was just getting up in front of people and finding out, yeah, they aren't going to do anything. They're trying to do the same thing as me. They're trying to learn public speaking, and they're fine.
That's cool. Well, I know when I was a program director at our campus radio station at UC Irvine, I wanted everyone to listen to their their own shows. So we wanted them to record the shows, which they wouldn't do. So the engineer and I arranged for that to get done, and we made people listen to their shows, take the cassettes home and listen to them. And as I think about it, I think that probably more often than not, some of these people were in radio because they didn't have to stand up in front of an audience, and they didn't think about being in front of an audience and speaking so much, and so they did what they did. But when they were compelled, if you will, to listen to themselves, they got better. And they got better because they then heard what everybody else is hearing, and they taught themselves that they could really do better than they thought they were doing, and that they thought that they could do. And I think that really makes a lot of difference. And some of those people actually ended up going into broadcasting as a career.
That's great. Yeah, it really is. It's just a matter of getting used to your own voice. I mean, some people just really got uh, annoyed, I guess
Yeah.
is the word, at, at their own voice. And they were like, I don't sound like that. Well, you don't sound like yourself inside your head.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that when I hear myself talk, I do know that I sound different than I think I sound. And so again, that's part of what I work on when I listen to recorded speeches, and I listen to what I say and how I say it, because I know what audiences like when they hear a speaker. So it gives me something to work toward, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
So it is kind of fun. So you went off to school. You were in high school and all that, and and did what people do in high school, I assume.
Yep. Lots of groups. I was in library club and let's see, Spanish club and music, uh, the musical and choir and various things. Just
Yeah,
normal stuff.
yeah, yeah. I did some of that. I was in the science club, and there was a math club. Wasn't in too many clubs, but I was in those two, and
Yep.
and had a lot of fun with that. So it's a good thing. And then, of course, as many of us do, then you went on to college. Where did you go to college?
Ripon College, Ripon, Wisconsin.
I've never heard of that college.
Very small. Liberal
Which
arts college.
which is all the better. I'm a fan of smaller colleges. I read in the book David and Goliath, the guy who invented the tipping point, wrote this book, and he talks about the fact that if more people would go to small colleges, they would discover that they could actually be kind of a larger fish in a small pond rather than being a fish that isn't necessarily as large a fish in a very large pond. So
Yes.
the value of people going to places that are smaller adds a lot of value, and you do get a lot more attention, and that's why I. One of the reasons I think I went to UC Irvine, we had 2,200, or excuse me, 2,700 students when I went there.
Okay.
Now there are 32,000 freshmen. My gosh, I can't believe how
Wow.
large it is. No, it's University of California, Irvine, UCI, which they always say lovingly, really, truly means under construction indefinitely. They're always building new things on the college.
Yeah, Ripon is under 1,000 students total. So
And what did you major
I
in?
knew all my professors. It was great.
And that's cool. And I did as well. I got to know some of them very well. Um, Actually, one of them even came to my wedding when my wife and I got married. Some 8 years after I graduated, or well, 6 years after I graduated. But
Nice.
we invited him and he came to the wedding, so that was kind of
That's
cool.
great.
So what did you major in?
Speech communication with a religion minor.
All right, wow, that's an interesting combination. Why a religion minor with that?
Religion has always intrigued me. I guess I am interested in people, and religion has such a strong effect on people. And
Hmm.
so I really just wanted to learn more about various religions and how they work.
So what do you think about religion in our world today and how much of an effect it has?
It
That's
just
probably a
floors me. It's a
yeah.
very big question, yes. But yes, I have. That's like one of the ideas for one of my next books is to dig into that. Uh, I have several ideas of things I want to cover, and that's one of them. But yeah, it floors me that there can be so much uh, variation in people who seem to believe the same things.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fascinating. I've said ever since escaping from the World Trade Center on September 11th that what happened, no matter what those terrorists say, was not a, a reflection on the whole world of Islam and the Muslim faith. Those were thugs who decided that they wanted to try to make the world bend to their will, if you will, and
Yes,
and they
absolutely.
they did a pretty good job for a little while, but it wasn't a religious war because I think most Muslims are not that way.
That's true. Yep.
And we shouldn't demonize that religion as such, especially since we could always go back and talk about the Crusades in, 1066 and so on. And if we want to talk about Christianity and what it did,
Yes,
the reality
absolutely.
is everybody tries to do things in the name of religion, and it just doesn't make sense at all.
It doesn't.
But
Absolutely.
but people try to justify anyway, which is truly unfortunate. Well, so what did you do after you got a degree?
Oh, let's see. I went off to, well, I got married a
There you
few months
go.
after graduation and moved uh, to the town where my husband was living. And I started working at Kmart. And from there, I went to a outlet mall. I was a retail store manager. And then I got my job at a nonprofit, and I've been at that nonprofit for 34 years until I retired just not too long ago.
Wow. What's the nonprofit, or can you say?
It's the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty useful. You were there a long time, huh?
I was
Wow.
I moved around to multiple departments, but I was able to keep
Hmm.
growing there, so I stayed.
So you you were there 34 years. Wow, that is a long time. What what did you learn about life being there for so long?
Wow,
How's that for a
a
general
lot.
question?
Yeah, that is a general question. Well, I learned, boy, so many things. Um, I mean, I have the foundation is an educational association, so I learned the actual benefits part of it. I have a certified employee benefits specialist designation, um, but also I learned a lot about people and work environments and getting along with people, and um, I learned a lot about technology. When I started at the foundation, the World Wide Web was not public yet.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, I was going to uh, graduate school at UW Milwaukee for library and information science. And while I was doing that, I was taking a an online searching course. And my boss, well, I worked in the library, so my boss asked me if I would create a website for the foundation because nobody else in the building really had even heard of the World Wide Web yet.
Yeah.
So I learned all about web development and programming and all of that just because I happened to be the only one that knew it.
And using
Anything.
tools like Netscape. Remember Netscape?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Long time ago.
And yeah, wow. So yeah, learned a lot of that. And then from the library, I went to IT and was a web developer for many years, and then from IT, I went to educational programs where I was working with our learning management system and the integration with our association management system. So I was doing integrations basically, um, and the things that I learned in technology careers that have helped me thus far have been uh, I was doing a lot of troubleshooting. So I would,
Mm,
you know, a lot of times, if you're in technology, garbage in, garbage out.
yeah.
So when I get to a problem, I say, this, there's garbage coming out or there's nothing coming out at all. And I work backward through the process to get to the source data and learning that you finding the source data and making sure that the source data is correct is really important. So I learned about a lot about working my way through systems to find that and also making sure that the systems work. So um, that has helped me a lot in my life because uh, when I got into the situation where I needed to write this book about, I managed to work my way back to the source of the problem.
Mm,
And so the source of the problem was my beliefs about me, about relationships, about other people. And so it was really helpful for me to have that process already in place in my brain that I could just work my way back to that and okay, now I can start from better data.
yeah. Do you think that working a lot in technology and perhaps some of the other areas where you worked, do you think that that taught you more about how to observe and look at things and better be able to analyze them and remembering them? I just find that so often people don't observe things, and I think learning to observe is extremely important to do.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. When that's like all of my career was observing and like you said, analyzing, being able to put what I've observed into what I want to happen or what I need to communicate with other people. Um, I think a lot of my career was connecting the right people to the right either technology or the other people or just making those connections.
But you had to learn how to observe people and draw conclusions and get that information to make that happen.
Oh yes, and it's a process. Just in growing up and watching people in general, like I said, religion was my thing because people fascinate me. So I've always been a people watcher. Um, Not like go sit at the mall and watch people, but I mean,
Yeah.
um, just really try to understand where people are coming from. And I think once I was in a technology career, it was even more important because a lot of times in those careers, people don't expect the technology person to be able to do that. And for me, that was the most important part was understanding the people, understanding what they wanted, what they were actually saying was not exactly what they wanted, and to try to get to what they wanted, and then to work with the system to be able to get what they wanted to come out correctly.
How did you discover that? How did you discover that people weren't necessarily saying what they really wanted, or um, that somehow it
Oh,
wasn't being articulated. And I understand that's a really tricky sort of thing.
yeah,
I know in asking myself that, I just kind of respond by saying it's just something you gain from a lot of experience, but you have to think about it. But, what do you
right.
think?
Yep, exactly. It's trial and error. You you keep having people ask you for one thing and then expecting something else until you figure out that what, that's really not what they want, and to get them to verbalize, okay, what is it you want coming out of this? It's tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it is something where you got to be pretty careful about how you do it, and to whom
Yes,
you focus your attentions to make that happen. Or if you've got some people who are difficult to deal with, then again, I guess that helps you stretch and grow, and you learn how to even deal with those people a little bit better, so that they're comfortable in interacting with you.
yeah, absolutely. But a big part of my job is making people feel comfortable enough to talk to me, and
Yeah.
to and a lot of times when I would get a project, I would go to the person that's using whatever it is and ask them, okay, where are you getting this data? Uh, what do you want it to look like? And and ask them deeper questions. And these are often the people who are low man on the totem pole and don't ever get asked. But those are the people that I needed to get to find out what where things were coming from, to actually give them what was going to work for them.
And that's interesting. You're saying like the low person on the totem pole doesn't get asked, and they're the ones that would love to be asked to be able to offer their opinion. So that opens up whole new opportunities when you convey that you're you're willing to listen. And of course, that also then deals with the whole issue of trust, because if they tell you something and say, "Well, I want this in confidence," and you have to keep it that way.
Yes, absolutely.
Trust is such a fleeting thing today, even though it's all around us everywhere we go and everywhere we look. I mean, we trust that the roofs on our houses aren't going to collapse while we're doing this interview, this conversation, and we trust that the internet is going to continue to work. It might, we'll see, but we trust in so many ways. But yet, unfortunately, we also confront or are confronted by situations that try to teach us not to trust and to be closed to trust, which is too bad.
Yes.
One of the things that I talk about actually in my latest book, Live Like a Guide Dog, is trust. I talk about the fact that in general, the difference between a dog and a person is, while dogs love unconditionally, and I think that's true, although they can be taught not to, obviously, but while dogs love unconditionally, they don't trust unconditionally. But the difference between a dog and a person is that dogs are much more open to trust, because we have just learned, or we've drawn the conclusion that we can't trust people. And so we lose that skill of being open to trust and truly learning how to determine whether we can trust any individual or not, rather than just saying we're not going to trust,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
which is so unfortunate. Well, I'm sure you've encountered that a lot.
I have indeed. And that was part of my process, was learning how to trust again. And that's a slow, hard process.
What caused you to start to learn not to trust? What happened in your life?
Okay. Well, I
If you
was
want to talk about it, but yeah.
well. I won't go into too deep a detail, but yeah, I was in a relationship where I was um, with a very a person who had low self esteem, And
Mm,
because of that, I would get told that things were my fault, or things were, uh, uh, if I hadn't done this, or if, um, anything that happened really was somehow brought back to me.
mm,
And as a person with higher self-esteem, I took that as my personal responsibility, rather than, um, looking at it as, no, that's really your choice, not something that I could cause. And that just kept eroding away at my confidence, and it ended up with me having no self-esteem whatsoever.
wow.
And then I hit a point where an event happened, and I, my brain went, no, I don't deserve that. And that's where the light switch flipped. And I was to, you know, then I started looking around and going, you know what? I didn't deserve that either, or that. And that was not about me. And so then I started to measure against that and go, okay, I can set up boundaries now, because this is behavior that I won't accept anymore. And I was able to start making boundaries, and I was able to start standing up for myself.
Mm.
And, as that process went on, I was able to, um, I guess it was motivate myself just by reconnecting with that higher self-esteem person that I had been earlier. And so I would, it honestly took a very long time, because I was at nothing. And at that point, I made a conscious effort to be gentle with myself, and to be patient with myself, and to accept myself. And so, with those, uh, being kind to myself thoughts, that's how I was able to move forward. And like I said, moving forward started motivating me, and I was able to bring myself back up to a higher self confidence.
Did
But
you get, oh, go ahead.
oh, but yeah, the trust being gone was a trust for not just, the person I was in a relationship with, but for so many things around me, because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust what I was believing about myself.
Mm. Did you hate yourself?
I would not say that. I would say, um, I just didn't understand myself. I
I
would,
was,
like I said, when I got to the bottom, I was able to say, I don't deserve that. So I wouldn't say I hated myself.
yeah. And that's why I asked the question, because that was my impression of what, from what you were saying. It
Yeah,
wasn't a hate or a dislike, it was a recognition of what should be and what
yeah,
was, and then how to deal with it.
yeah. I was, because I got there, and I was like, the light switch went on, and I was like, how did I get here? How did this even happen? It just, I couldn't understand.
But as you progressed and as you learned about yourself, and that of course was part of it, is that you were learning about yourself and bringing yourself back. Um, the person you had a relationship with, you weren't able to I gather, make positive steps to get them to be a lot better than they were.
Um, that was not my focus. My focus was
No,
to set boundaries, um, so that they couldn't hurt me anymore.
right, right. It wasn't a matter
Um,
of you're trying to heal them, but
Yeah,
setting boundaries, and it would have been nice if they had recognized what was going on. But that was the difference, is that you recognized and they did not.
right. And honestly, um, once I got to a place where I was back to being who I felt like me, um, he was able to look at that and take some motivation from that. And he actually went and got help through therapy as well. So it actually turned out way better than expected. But
And yeah. So are you guys still married?
yes, we are.
Well, there you go. Okay. And that was what I was curious about. So he did it wasn't you can't fix everything because people
Right.
have to fix themselves. But
Yep.
he was able to recognize that, which is so cool.
Yeah. Honestly, I moved out twice. So, I mean, like I said, I set boundaries.
Yeah.
um, but you, we made it work. I mean, like I said, when I first made the change, I was not strong enough to move to be on my own. I just wasn't. And so, I just tried to be as patient with myself as possible. And, uh, and I just kept, kept those boundaries as, okay, you can't talk to me like that. That's just not going to work. And as I moved forward, he kind of came along with me.
Mm. Well, and it sounds like you're both the better for it today.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. We've come a long way. I wouldn't say we're perfect for sure, but
Well, it's a process.
yes, it is.
So what does he do for work or for a living?
He is a sales person for a home improvement company.
Ah, home improvement. Tim the Tool Man Taylor, but that's another
Yes.
story. Oh gosh. Well, that's pretty cool. And does he do well at selling?
Yes, he does. Yeah. He
That
had his
in a
own business for many years, and so it just comes pretty naturally to him.
well, at the same time, if you're going to be good at sales, you have to learn to observe and not take things too personally sometimes as well.
Yes.
Um, I learned a lot about sales when I was confronted by needing to go into sales or finding another job, and then I took a Dale Carnegie sales course. And one of my favorite observations about sales is that the best salespeople are really counselors. They're teachers. They guide you in and help you make the right decision rather than just trying to force something on you, which doesn't mean that they're not trying to make a dollar and sell products, but you can
Right.
also find that your product might not be what somebody wants. And if you push them into buying it, that's going to cost you in the end anyway.
Right. And that's why he makes a good salesman because he did the work for 15 years and at his own company, and then he went moved to sales, and um, just because his body was wearing out,
Mm,
and for because he knows how the product works, how it goes on the house or whatever, he can explain that to the customer, and that makes it so much easier for them to understand, why they need what they need and how it works.
yeah. And I have found that the better salespeople really do understand how the product works and they take the time to keep up with things because that's going to make them better at what they do.
Yes,
So now you have children. How many children?
two, girl and a boy,
And how old are they?
29 and 25.
Oh, they're just kids.
They're just kids.
Yeah. And have they gone into sales? Just checking.
No,
Okay.
I have no interest in doing that.
What do they do?
My daughter works in customer service, and my son is Air National Guard member.
Oh, okay. So it's hopefully it sounds like both of them have some really decent self-esteem.
Yes.
They learned that along the way from the two of you, which is good, which is a positive thing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you have retired from being with the nonprofit. You said you were there for 34 years, and what caused you to retire?
Writing this book. I'm looking at writing more and, doing marketing and doing all the things. Book has been a lot to do and work full time.
Yeah.
So I decided to give it my all.
Did you self-publish, or does the publisher
Yes.
publish it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes even more of a marketing responsibility for you. Although I think publishers are pushing more for most authors to do more to market their own books rather than the publishers helping as much
Right.
as perhaps they could. But nevertheless, well, tell us
Yeah, it's
about
a
the book
lot.
then. Tell us, if you
Okay.
would, tell us about that.
Well, it's why smart girls get into bad relationships and how not to do it again. I started out with, well, basically, the book is for people who want better relationships, not just women. Uh, but I started out with a smart girls title because uh, that is something I identify with. I think of it as an identity, um, because a lot of books on relationships are books written from the perspective of therapists or the perspective of um, people who have been abused or some kind of trauma or um, have addictions or something like that. And um, that's not that's not who I am. And so I was trying to give a voice to, you know, average people have these problems too.
Yeah.
um, so the smart girl identity is more about um, really like in high school, people would, who didn't know me well would sign my yearbook. You're so smart. Or people at work, thank you for fixing that. You're so smart, right? And I believed that. And what I believed was that reasonable humans make reasonable choices. And that's not always true.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I wrote the book, or actually when I hit the bottom and I started looking back, I was like, I don't know how I got here. So how did I get here? I went through the process. I figured out that my beliefs weren't quite right, and they sounded good, but when I actually put them to action, they really didn't work. So the book is my process of getting from bottom of the barrel self esteem back up to high self esteem and looking at those beliefs and rewriting them.
So
Um,
how so? Like some of your beliefs that didn't work, for example.
I will read you a few of them if you don't mind.
Okay.
So you get the idea of where this goes. So there's 9 of them. Belief number 1, I can trust myself, became I can trust myself when I am being honest with myself.
Ah,
Because I was lying to myself quite a bit of the time, as it turns out.
right.
Number 2, I am a good, helpful person. Became I am a good, helpful person, but that is not where I find my value. And that kind of blew me out of the water when I figured that one out. Number 3, I am smart, but I can't appear smarter than my partner. And that's where the um, focus on women comes in. It's kind of looks at the social oppression of women and how that
Yeah.
um, affects your beliefs. If you believe that stuff. So, number 3 became I am smart and I don't have to hide it.
Ah,
Number 4, I must guard my relationship not only from outside but from inside too. Became I must guard my own boundaries to maintain my mental health and stay true to me. Number 5, it is important to keep things steady and stable. Became Keeping things steady and stable doesn't allow me to grow. Fear blocks my growth. Embracing the uncomfortable for a time helps me become better. That one was a hard one to learn.
I'll bet.
Number 6, self-care is indulgent and not a priority. Became self-care is a high priority. If I don't take care of me, I can't be good at caring for anyone else. Number 7, I have emotional muscle and I can muscle through anything. Became I have emotional muscle and I can use it to pull out of negative thoughts. I don't need to deny my emotions or wallow in them, just recognize them, feel them, and continue to move all the way through them. And this one kind of hits home for my daughter. My daughter was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis at the age of 20 months. And she used her emotional muscle to muscle through her pain because she didn't want to see the reaction of people feeling sorry for her. And so she had a lot of using that emotional muscle to just not show people her pain.
Mm.
And that has been something that we've had to work on for a long time.
What did she discover? What did she finally do?
Well, it's been a process, but she's finally actually showing her pain. She, because like she's had a cyst that burst and it wrapped around some things, and she couldn't tell the doctor in charge that she was having that much pain. She didn't make it a 10 on the pain scale, so the doctor didn't think that she was that these complications had happened, because most people couldn't even walk with this pain, but she could because she's super high pain tolerance.
Yeah.
And she learned that she doesn't need to hide her pain, which was pretty life shaking for her. Yeah. And she's learned that she can actually tell her doctors, yes, I'm actually having some pain, and I really need to have you work on this or give me medication for this or whatever. But yeah, she's really come a long way as far as being honest with herself and with other people.
Yeah.
Let's see. Number 8, I can rely on my smartness to figure it out. Became I can rely on my smartness and problem-solving ability, but life isn't always logical. Sometimes I'm starting from a faulty belief. I don't have to be perfect. It's okay to ask for help when I don't understand and get stuck. And that one, it seems very obvious, but that one was really ingrained and kept coming up in different ways. Number 9, partial is enough. I can and should fill in the rest. Became I am a whole person with my own thoughts, emotions, talents, hopes, dreams, and goals. If I want to be in a relationship, my significant other should see me as a whole person and should be a whole person themselves.
Wow. Some pretty deep concepts, needless to say.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you were willing to step back and observe and think about yourself, so you were able to create these conclusions and make these changes, which is what it's really all about.
Yeah, I think that's what's different about my book, is that it's not written by a therapist or somebody who's at the other side. It's somebody who's actually in it. digging through it and and feeling it, and it makes the it. I pulled apart the process and was you have to hit all of the things, the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, uh, social, all of the things to pull those beliefs out of all of the different places in your life where they stuck.
You think that people really have to, how do I say this, go to the bottom or hit rock bottom before they can really start to learn?
I hope not.
I
Clearly,
mean,
I did, but
you did, and but I hear it a lot. You really don't know until you hit rock bottom, and I'm not sure I totally buy that. It really depends on what you're able to learn and what conclusions you're able to draw. But a lot of times, hitting rock bottom, if you will, maybe emotionally at least, um, brings people to where they need to be. But with you, I hope that it isn't always that way, and it doesn't need to always be that way.
right. I think there's there's different rock bottoms. It's I got to the point where I needed to learn, and I learned, and that may not be what you and I would view as rock bottom to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
but it's I finally flipped the switch, and that's somebody else may have a switch at a different level than us.
Or they may not see that there's a switch to flip, which is all about choice.
Yep.
So what got you started down the road of writing the book?
To be honest, I never thought I would write a book. That was never, a big goal in life for me. And I think it's totally a God thing because
Mm-hmm.
I was, my daughter's been telling me, you need to write a book. You need to write a book for, years. And I was like, yeah, yeah, sure, no problem. And then all of a sudden it was time to write the book. And I was like, I don't know why it's time to write the book, but it's time to write the book. And um, honestly, it flowed. I mean, I had all these great ideas for a book, and they went poof out the window when I wanted to start writing. I just kind of sketched out an outline that was terrible, and showed it to a few people, and they're like, "Sure, you go." And I threw it away and just started writing. And once I started writing, it flowed. It actually just came out. And um, once I was in it a little, a few chapters in, then I was able to um, organize it and figure out what I wanted to say and make an outline. But I couldn't do any of that until I just started writing. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. It was odd. And then I gave it to my son. I gave like the first two chapters probably to my son, and he read it and he pushed it back over the table at me and said, "Big words." And I was like, "Okay." So I took it and I took out all the big words and I made it more conversational. And now uh, everybody who has read it and talks to me is like, it just feels like a conversation with a good friend over a cup of coffee
There you
or,
go.
or a glass of wine. So
Yeah.
that's where it got.
Yeah, it's about not preaching but presenting and and teaching in a non-confrontive way, which is what it's really about, which is what sales is about.
Yep.
But that was very observant on his part to say that.
Yeah. I was like, you made it so much better.
When I wrote Thunderdog, my first book, I wrote it with someone. We collaborated. I had worked on it for a long time, or at least worked on ideas, and then Susie Flory called one day and she was writing her own book, and she said tell me your story. And after I did, she said, you should write your own book and I'll help you do it. And she did. One of the things that we had was that the book is about being in the World Trade Center, but it's also a lot about my life. And when we got it to the editor, because her agent, who became my agent, Chip McGregor, was able to sell it to Thomas Nelson Publishing, which is now part of HarperCollins. But the editor said, my problem with this book is the transitions. And kind of said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you talk at the beginning of each chapter about an event on September 11th, and then you go back in your life, but you don't transition between the two. And then when you come back, you don't transition. And I get lost. And when he described that, it just immediately clicked what he was saying. And I actually then spent a weekend putting transitions in every chapter at the right places. And when he read that, he said, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was talking about. And when one of the major reviewers of the book, Kirkus, which reviews books for publishers and libraries and so on, when they reviewed it, they said one of the most powerful parts about it were the transitions.
Nice.
And so I appreciate what your son said, because sometimes the unexpected thing that someone says is what sends you down a road to make it a much better thought process and a much better book or a much better whatever than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I had a friend from college read it from an author perspective, because she's written 5 books, and um, she gave me just, you know, really. I mean, she wrote fiction books, so they weren't the same, but she gave me just really good authoring advice as far as, you know, you use this word too many times, you know, things like that. And that was really, really helpful too, to just, okay, I get it. That would make it much more smooth. And, you know, that was really helpful for me too. And it's just, just to get feedback in any capacity is so helpful, I think.
Well, and all of those comments that people give you help teach you how to write better.
Yes, absolutely.
How has writing the book changed your perspective?
Wow. Well, first thing, I had no idea about writing books or publishing or marketing or any of that. So that's been a whole big learning curve.
Yeah.
But as far as, you know, even writing through the book helped teach me some things about the process as well. Um, just and you know, as far as relationships go, um, and talking through it with, I had about a dozen people reading it at chapter by chapter as I got them done, and um, having getting that feedback from them as far as um, you know, how it affected them, and it was really just so, I guess, helpful for me to learn what other people were thinking when they're reading it, because, you know, some of the things had never occurred to me. Some of the things were from friends who had been through some kind of childhood trauma, and I was kind of looking at, okay, I get what you're saying, and I think that what you're telling me is this part is coming from your childhood trauma, but this other part is definitely something that I could add to my book. Um, and I didn't want to make my book about trauma, um, because it really, in my mind, was for the person that uh, was just an average person living an average life, having average relationships. Um, However, my friends who have had childhood trauma have actually been the most affected by my book, which I find fascinating.
That's interesting, but it does make sense because clearly you're trying to help people be more open about themselves to themselves, and the people
Yeah.
that do that are the people that uh, have been in situations where maybe they haven't, and they maybe intellectually realize that they need to grow and change, but they hadn't totally emotionally adopted that stance, and so you help them with that, which is cool.
Yep. Which was not something I was expecting for sure.
No, understand. Now you have a blog also, right? Called
I
Helpfulness.
do.
Why is it called Helpfulness, and what is it about?
It is called Helpful Mess because when I was
Helpful
writing
Mess.
this book, I was writing about helpfulness and how that kind of steered me in the wrong direction because that's where I was finding my value. And I had a typo that made it helpful mess,
Mess,
and
yeah. I said mess,
I
it's
so
mess.
related to that mess.
Yeah.
It's like that messy part. That's me. I so related to that that I glommed onto that word, and I was like, okay, this word is mine.
Well, and it really goes right along with the book and everything we've talked about today, needless to
Yeah.
say. Have you thought about doing things like starting a coaching program, or do you do any of that?
I do not. My daughter is. She is a life coach, and she has started a holistic nutrition program. So she's kind of doing that thing, and and I've never really been interested in doing that kind of thing. So I'm like, you go, I will help you.
Okay. Well, that's fair.
Mhm.
I think we all do what we feel we're best at, and it may come to the time where you'll suddenly discover that you're really better at it than you think, and that you could coach people, or maybe not. But that's
It's
really
possible.
something to look at.
Yeah, I do want to focus on my writing for a while, but when she's done with her program, maybe we'll get something together.
Well, there you go. And she lives close to you.
Yeah, she's probably about half hour away.
All right, so Wisconsin homed everywhere, which is pretty cool. Well, so what would you advise? What kind of advice would you give to someone who's going through a lot of the things that you've gone through and so on? What would be the first thing that you would say to them to hopefully get them started down a different path of life rather than thinking so little of themselves and not really wanting to move forward?
I would tell them they have options. You can leave. Um, your value is not in how helpful you are. Um, and be gentle and be kind to yourself, and accept that you may not be coming from uh, a belief that is true. And look, try to see when you feel something not right, kind of off, kind of look at your beliefs and say, where is this coming from? Because a lot of times you can find it if you look hard enough.
Yeah. It's about teaching people to truly develop the skill of self analysis, if you will,
Yeah, it really is.
which is something that we all ought to do more of. We tend not to really look at ourselves, and it goes back to the same thing as the whole concept of the fear of public speaking. If we step out of ourselves and look at what happened, we beat up on ourselves rather than recognizing this is a teaching moment and we can learn from it rather than allowing it to just be something that beats us up,
Yes, absolutely.
which makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to thank you for doing this. We've been at this about an hour. Can you believe
Oh,
it?
wow.
I'm telling you. But I really enjoyed having you talk about it. Do you have any kind of last minute thoughts that you want to convey to people?
Well, let's see. I guess if you think reasonable humans make reasonable choices, maybe rethink that. If you want to find my book, you can find it at my website. Let's see,
And what's your website?
BarbaraLeighAuthor.com. And Leigh is Leigh.
So it's BarbaraLeighAuthor.com.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I hope people will find it and will read it. It's available? Is it a hard copy or ebook or both or?
Both.
Okay.
Yep. And it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Ingram, Apple, Google, all the places.
They're an Audible version or an audio version?
Not yet.
Something
I've
to
had
work
people
on.
asking. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I know I have two people that have been asking, and I have to start making money before I can spend money on that.
Yeah, I hear you. Well,
Yeah.
unless you read it yourself, which cuts the cost way down.
Yeah, I can try that. I have no idea how to do that either. So that, that's added to my pile of things I need to learn.
There you go. It's an adventure.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely. It's on the list.
well, Barbara, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank all of you for listening. I hope that this has been not only enjoyable, but educational and worth your time. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to get your thoughts about this. So any of you who we'd love to hear from you. Please email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's michaelhi @accessibe, accessibe.com. Wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star review. We really appreciate those reviews, and especially we love 5-star reviews. We want positive reviews, but you give us your honest thoughts. We love that. We appreciate it, and we value your comments very highly. If you know anyone who you think ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know. And if, by the way, you aren't sure how to review or whatever, or you want to find another place to hear more podcasts in addition to wherever you're listening to it, today you can go to michaelhingson.com/podcast. That's michaelhingson.com/podcast. And all of our episodes are there. But we really value your time. We value that you like what we're doing. We'll always love to hear from people. So please let us know and keep the emails coming. And again, Barbara, I just want to thank you. We really appreciate your time and I'm so glad that you came and spent this time with us.
Thank you, Michael. It's been great being here. You're so kind to me. Appreciate that.